Because I've just financialized the problem, and you've just become more trouble than you're worth. The girl says you're going to do the job. You said that before. Why now? What is it all of a sudden? Everybody needs money. That's why they call it money.
Welcome to Money Unplugged. I'm Chris Hill. Thanks for being here. Is it your first time? Well, make yourself comfortable. Click the follow button so you don't miss an episode. Welcome. Today on the show, Jason Moser. I think of all the investing analysts at the Motley Fool, I may have spent more time in the studio with Jason than anyone else. And that is partly because Jason is always up for talking about money and investing. Even if you haven't seen the movie The Town, written and directed by Ben Affleck, I'm guessing you may have seen the internet meme from that movie. It's the scene where Ben Affleck comes into Jeremy Renner's apartment one night, and he's clearly agitated, and he says to his friend, "I need your help. I can't tell you what it is. You can never ask me about it later, and we're going to hurt some people." And Jeremy Renner just looks at him and says, "Whose car are we going to take?" He doesn't need any other details. His mindset is, "You need me to do this thing? Let's go." That's Jason. Jason is always up for talking about investing and money. And we did. We talked about the things you learn when you're younger, the lessons you can pass on to others, and I learned about the college degree that Jason almost got. So let's get to it with Jason Moser. Let's start with when you're a kid. Do you have an early memory of money?
I do. I think one of the things that stands out to me as a kid, I remember the tooth fairy very well. Like, I remember as a kid, like, wanting my teeth to fall out, because once I realized I was getting money for these things, I was like, holy cow, this is a nice racket. I remember that very fondly. And then another thing that stood out to me, because I think, my mom and dad did a very good job instilling the idea of saving at a young age. And, for some people it sticks, for others it doesn't. For me, it just kind of stuck. But the other thing that stood out to me was oftentimes that tooth fairy money and birthday money, whatever else. You remember growing up back in the 1970s, Shoney's, right? The restaurant Shoney's.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a big deal back then, right? Shoney's big boy, the big old kid holding the tray up or the plate up or whatever. And so we lived right down the road from a Shoney's, and that was like one of my dad's treats to us growing up. It was like, hey, kids, we're going out to dinner. It's kind of like Clark Griswold. We were loading everybody up in the car. I get two siblings, and, it was always madness. But I had a Shoney's Big Boy piggy bank. I don't know if you remember those.
I don't.
But it was the actual Big Boy, just in piggy bank form. And, the slot up on top of his head where you drop your money in there. And so I remember having that Shoney's Big Boy piggy bank, and I always remember just, man, I'm going to fill this thing up, and I just always enjoyed it. And then, you try to figure out what you're going to do with that money that you've saved. But those are the two memories that I think stand out.
That sound that the coins make when you drop it in and you start to figure out, you shake the piggy bank, and it's like, oh, okay, I still have some room here, that sort of thing. I love the tooth fairy because I'm sure you're not the only kid who. That's, in some ways, it's your first version of business planning. You start to think like a business person where you're like, hold on, let me understand this. So I give you this, and when I wake up the next morning, I get that. This is how this business works? Okay, let's play this out.
Yeah, and you're going through and doing, let's do an inventory check. How many more teeth do I have to lose? And, should I risk, ousting one of these more permanent teeth? And I never did that, of course. But, as a parent, it was always really fun to do that with our kids. Our kids are in college now, but the tooth fairy years with them were still a lot of fun. And we tried to do basically the same thing with them and instilling that idea of saving, and so it worked out well.
You talked about your parents trying to instill the sense of saving money and that habit. What form did that take? Was that just conversations with them? Was that a regular thing, or was it just sort of something that you observed over time? Because one of the things I've talked with people about on this podcast is there are direct conversations you can have, and then there's the observational stuff that you sort of pick up where you notice. It's not a direct, I'm telling you what to do, or I'm telling you this is how we do things here, but it's more, observational. So I'm curious what form it took when you were a kid.
I mean, I think it was a little bit of both. It was certainly, they were very open in regard to money. I mean, absolutely back then it was more taboo, right? I mean, I think parents just wouldn't discuss money with their kids. And I think part of that was because parents didn't really know a whole heck of a lot either. And thankfully, we've gotten a little bit better about that in regard to financial literacy. But then it was also observational. And it was just throughout my life, they would incentivize saving, right? They would say, hey, listen, if you do this, then we'll do that. You save up this, we'll match that. And so they had the conversations, but then they also put it into practice, and there were ultimately incentives to behave that way. And if you didn't, then you didn't get what you wanted, but at least you knew who was responsible for that.
Do you remember your first job?
I do. So technically my first job, I guess really my first job was I would mow yards in our neighborhood. I mean, this is when I was, 12, 13 years old. And I would just strap the lawnmower to the back of my bicycle and just doodle around the neighborhood. I mean, I got, a good client list of like 10, 12 yards in the neighborhood. And I mean, down in Charleston, South Carolina growing up, I mean, that grass was growing all year round. So I did that for a while. But then when I was 15, and I was able to get my driver's license, then my first actual job where I had to, pay taxes and whatnot was at a seafood restaurant right there on Shem Creek in Mount Pleasant called A.W. Shucks. And
That's
so
a
it was
good name.
and it was a good place. It was a fun restaurant. That was a real eye-opener. I learned a lot. I mean, I was just there as a busboy and food runner. But, you learn very quickly, I think, being in the service industry, how you want to treat people because you want to be treated sort of the same way. And then I think you also probably learn that maybe it's not what you want to do for the rest of your life. And so it was a job that taught me a whole lot.
You also learn Anthony Bourdain. I remember hearing him talk about this, what he learned, his first job as a dishwasher, I think when he was 16 years old, the value of showing up on time. And just like in some ways for him, that was one of the most indelible lessons he learned as it relates to work and money is show up on time.
There's a lot to be said for that. And I will readily admit I have been guilty of breaking that rule. Thankfully, here now at the Fool, we're not quite so micromanaged. So showing up on time is a little bit of a wider range, but
there are certainly plenty of jobs out there.
There are a lot.
Where
in the service industry, I think is a great example.
Service industry, if you're a first responder,
first responder.
You have to.
Exactly.
There's no Walter Lee. You go to Wofford College.
Yes.
Economics degree?
Exactly, yeah.
What attracted you to economics as a study?
Part of that was probably the process of elimination. Like I knew I didn't want to be a doctor, right? My father's a physician. I kind of saw what that took, and I just knew it wasn't really what I wanted to pursue. And so with economics, I mean, it combined, I think, for me, the interest in business and money and in sort of economic theory and whatnot. It gave me what I felt like, if I graduated with that degree, a wide range of possibilities, right? I didn't want to go to law school. I didn't. So I followed that up. I was an economics major. And I was, like, Wofford didn't have minors at the time. Maybe they do. I don't think they do. But ultimately, I was just a smidge away from a double major with a philosophy addition there.
Wow.
I took a lot of philosophy in college. And that was something I didn't realize that I enjoyed. But when I got to college, and it was a liberal arts school. So, I mean, we had to take a little bit of everything. And when I was introduced to philosophy in college, I thought, man, this is kind of interesting. It makes you think, and it makes you ask all these questions. And it gave great practice with writing, and it was a lot of reading. And so I just enjoyed it. And so I basically, I got all of my economics courses throughout the 4 years there. And rather than fill the void with classes that didn't really interest me, I just decided I'd fill them with the ones that do. And that was philosophy. And I mean, I was just a couple of classes away from actually being able to declare the double major. But that wasn't really the priority. I just really enjoyed it. But it gave me a lot of exposure to writing, which is in my job now, has proven to be very valuable.
I never knew this about you. And this now explains for me so much.
I hope in a good way.
In a good way, about your approach to investing. Because when I was walking over here this morning, I was thinking to myself about your temperament as an investor, and it has always been Zen-like in good times and bad.
I give my dad a lot of credit for that. My dad's the one who taught me about investing when I was a kid, but my dad, that's very much his demeanor in life, investing, golf, work, all of it. And he taught me that just early on in being able to take the emotions out of it. Because I think that's, where many people, and I can improve here too, I think, as well, but it's just the emotional side of investing. And look at this past week we had. It was bonkers every day. Up and down, left and right. It made no sense whatsoever. And so you'd have people ask, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, I'm not doing anything. I'm sitting on my hands. I didn't buy anything. I didn't sell anything." I invested a little bit more into the S&P index or the global index fund that I have in my 401k because I just got a paycheck. But no, I didn't do anything. Yeah. What did you do?
But we've talked about this God knows how many times. That's the instinct.
Yeah.
In good times and bad. In those sort of moments of market euphoria and market panic, it's, I got to do something.
Yep.
Because in non-investing parts of life, you do something. If your house is on fire, you're not just going to sit there and be like, "Well, I'm just going to see how this plays out."
Just see how this goes. And I think that it's always worth remembering. Like I say, I didn't do anything, but technically I did because I got paid, and that money went into that index fund. So to me, for most people, we're stock guys. We love individual stocks, but I like index funds too, and ETFs and whatnot. And I think it's just a great lesson. Most people really need to be investing in index funds, dollar cost averaging, do it in the good times, do it in the bad times, just take the thinking out of it. And like I said, I didn't do anything. Technically, I guess I did, but it didn't feel like I did because I've got it set on autopilot already.
You graduate with a degree in economics, and I know you picked economics in part because it gave you a wide range of opportunities, potential careers.
Right.
What were you doing right when you graduated? What were you looking to do?
I didn't know. I really honestly didn't know. I got out of school and I was just kind of like, I still really, really enjoyed golf. And I was like, man, if I'm going to give golf a shot, then I need to give it a shot. And so I went into the golf business. I was worked my way through the PGA of America program to get my Class A status, and I was a club professional for, I think, close to 7 years. 2 years spent in Greenville, South Carolina, where I met my future wife, and then that was kind of how we started our relationship. She was working at the club where I was working. We just, met and things ran their course, thankfully, by the way. And then I got an opportunity to move up to Severna Park, Maryland, to work at a club there. And it was a promotion. It was a good club. And so I did that. And then I just got to the point where I kind of, you kind of reach that point where you think, all right, this isn't really, I think, what I want to do for the rest of my life.
And as a club pro, you're doing what? You're giving lessons?
I did, yeah. I taught a lot. And but ultimately, you're running the club, right? You're running the golf operation for the club. And you have a team. We had a head golf professional. I was an assistant golf professional. And you do teaching. You're running the golf shop. To me, that was actually a lot of fun. There was the business aspect to it of making those numbers work. And running golf tournaments. I did a lot with junior golf. Ran the junior golf program there for several years. And so it is. You wear a lot of hats, but you don't get paid a lot, and you work a lot of hours. And most of those hours are when you would rather not be working, like weekends and holidays. And I just came to the conclusion, I was like, this isn't conducive to family life. And I knew at that point that I wanted to ask Robin to marry me. And I thought, well, if we're going to do this, then I want to maybe have a little bit more of a normal life. And so I took that and went to Bank of America and became a loan officer there for a couple of years.
To what extent did the two of you talk about money before you got engaged?
I would say we always discussed it. Like, it wasn't ever taboo. Like, it wasn't anything like we said, well, we don't have massively different worldviews. And so I think as we were preparing to get married, And we went through the wedding planning process really fully together because we were living up in Northern Virginia at the time. This was 2001, but we were getting married down in Peachtree City, Georgia. And so we were doing a lot of long distance planning, which meant we had to do it together, which meant we all saw the numbers. And we just kind of knew going into it that we always wanted to be a team. And so we just tackled money as with everything else, kind of with that team mentality.
You mentioned being a loan officer at Bank of America. I know you worked at Travelers Insurance at one point.
Yes.
It's almost like you had a bingo card of jobs in the finance industry, and you're just trying to check them all off. I don't mean to make light of that, but I am curious, was your approach almost like, I'm just going to test this out. I know I'm qualified to do this. Let me just see how this goes. And then after a couple of years, you're like, yeah, this isn't working.
So, yeah, if you look back at my life, I've had my resume on paper is kind of funny looking. PGA golf professional, and then went to Bank of America, worked there for 2 years as a loan officer. Now, before Travelers Insurance happened, I actually ended up traveling the globe with my wife for 5 years. She is with the federal government, and she had a couple of overseas assignments, or opportunities rather. And because I was at Bank of America, and I thought, you know what, I could take this job or leave it. I don't know that I really feel passionately about it. So we up and moved to Cairo, Egypt for 3 years. And then we did another follow-on assignment to Astana, Kazakhstan for another 2. And thankfully, we're working at the embassies in those locations. And thankfully, they view spouses very favorably, and they want to keep families happy. And so I was able to actually get a job with the State Department for 5 years, working at the embassies in Egypt and Kazakhstan. And I came to the conclusion that wasn't really what I wanted to do for the rest of my life either. And when Kazakhstan was over, and we thought, okay, we had our kids along the way. We had this house down in Georgia. I thought, okay, well, let's figure out what the next step is. And I had a buddy who was a connection from the golf business who worked at Travelers Insurance. He got me in the door for an interview, and then that worked out okay. And so I did the year at Travelers. Now, mind you, along the way here, when we were in Kazakhstan, that's where I actually discovered the Motley Fool. I just clicked on an article, and boom, I was like, man, I found my tribe. And so I became a member first and foremost in the mid-2000s. And at that point, when I got the job at Travelers, I was neck deep in Motley Fool content. Like, I was always reading it and studying it and learning it, and I just loved it. And I had made a connection in Kazakhstan with someone who actually knows and is good friends with Matty Argersinger here at the Fool. And we all kind of virtually met, and then just nature took its course, I guess, and I got my foot in the door here in 2010. And I kind of figured when I got here, I was like, man, this is what I want to do with the rest of my life. And so I've been at the Fool now for 15 years, and I don't anticipate going anywhere.
Fun fact about Jason Moser, he is the person who introduced me to Dizzy Pig Barbecue. Jason loves to cook, he takes pride in his grilling, and he's the first person to tell me years ago, you gotta try this stuff. Whether you're grilling up chicken, beef, pork, seafood, or vegetables, Dizzy Pig has got the rubs and spices to impress your guests and make your taste buds happy. I actually made my good friend Luke happy because he lives hundreds of miles away, and I sent him a bottle of one of their most popular rubs. It's called Spicy Pineapple Head. My friend Luke had never heard of Dizzy Pig, and now he gets to try it out. This is a small family-owned company. They grind whole spices just before bottling. We're talking about true craft products here that are made in small batches and bottled by hand. Don't take my word for it. Try it for yourself. Go to dizzypigbbq.com, use the promo code MONEY, and get 10% off your first purchase. Just click the link in the show notes or go to dizzypigbbq.com and get 10% off by using the promo code MONEY. All right, let's get back to Jason. I think you have done a better job, as far as I can observe, teaching your kids about money in an intentional way than anyone I know. certainly better than me, because we've talked over the years about the importance of teaching kids about money. But I've always observed you as someone who was very intentional about it, getting involved, junior achievement, that sort of thing, here and there. And I'm curious what you have found to be among the most effective messages that get across. Because as a parent, nothing sinks in 100%.
Yeah.
100% of your message, the things you're trying to teach your kids, it doesn't sink in. Maybe it sinks in over time, but no lesson is absorbed immediately.
Not at all.
So for people listening, and I'm a lost cause, because now I feel like I'm actually starting to figure out what is effective in teaching young kids about money, but I don't have young kids anymore.
Yeah.
What are one or two things that you look back on and go, boy, they got this right away?
Getting them invested, getting them actually invested at a young age. We got their first stocks when they were like 5 and 7 years old. They didn't really know, but it all kind of, it stemmed from a lesson. We just went into a Panera one day, and they were like, they're big Panera fans. And I was like, well, we own a little bit of this. And they looked at me with just this awe. They were like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, by virtue of owning these shares, right, I own the stock. So we are part owners of this business. And they thought that was really cool. And I could see at that point, this was probably an age where we could at least get the ball rolling. And the goal was really twofold. I wanted them to learn the merits of saving and investing. I also wanted them to see the value in what time does, right? You kind of just let time do the heavy lifting in most cases. And because they were so young, and we just opened these, custodial accounts for them, each just individual custodial brokerage accounts. It was very easy to do. But the idea was whenever they had money saved up, or whenever Christmas came around or a birthday, we could buy them stock, right? Buy them shares of a company. And there were two rules. Number one, you can't sell. There's just no selling. You can only buy. And then the second rule was you cannot buy the same stock twice. So if you bought Starbucks last quarter, well, it's got to be something else.
Diversification.
Immediate diversification. But my goal there was ultimately, because they're not checking their portfolios on a daily basis, man. Come on, But I knew that would be the case. I'm not trying to teach them to be like investing nerds. What I wanted them to see was a real life example of just, this is how you can save your money and make it work for you. And they look back at this portfolio and they see these gains that they have in their overall portfolio. Now they're freshmen and sophomore in college, and they realize, they're like, I didn't do anything. All I did was save money and just invest in businesses that we talked about, right? We would talk about this stuff on the way to school and whatnot. And so now all of a sudden they look back at it and they see this real life example of how it works and how impactful it can be. And thankfully, it stuck. They both want to continue that ball rolling, and so I think that's worked out really well.
Let's go to the speed round. What is a thing you have bought that makes you happy?
Oh, I would have to say my golf clubs. That's something golf has been a core part of my life since I was 5 years old, and so yeah, that's something for me. They're not the cheapest in the world, right? You got to put a little money down for them, but I use them a lot, and I can use them for a long time, and I get a lot of value out of them. So they always, most of the time, bring a smile to my face. Sometimes they don't, but that's how golf is.
Have you ever made a purchase that you regret and sometimes you still think about it?
Yeah, I remember actually not many, because I feel very intentional when I spend my money. I'm not a big stuff guy. I would just rather go shopping for stocks. Man, I bought an iPad when those things first came out, and I just look back. I've never bought another one since. I just realized so quickly, I was like, what the hell am I doing with this? I was just watching video with it. I've got a laptop for work. It's not like a productive tool for me. It was sheer consumption. And then one day, I, of course, fall for the old Apple. Hey, it's time to update your operating system. Brick the whole device. It was useless. So I threw it away. I just realized I have no use for this thing. I'm not going to go burn another $500 on some silly device just because I can't figure out what. I would just rather invest the money somewhere.
What is the last thing you splurged on just for yourself, not for your family or anyone else?
I've got a friend who is a member at a country club out in Tulsa, Oklahoma called Southern Hills. And Southern Hills has a tremendous major championship resume. I think 5 PGA championships, a couple of U.S. Opens, a lot of other stuff. And so it's a really special place. And he invited me out to his member guest golf tournament last September. And so, as you can imagine, being in Tulsa, I mean, there's a lot involved with this, right? Plane tickets, hotel rooms, rental car. And then, I mean, that's before you even get to playing any golf. And so all in, I mean, it was not an inexpensive trip, but I had the blessing of my wife. And thankfully, you know, I keep sort of some discretionary money around for things like that. And so that was a lot of fun. And a fun little follow-up to that. So we ended up winning our flight in the golf tournament. And I won 2 of the closest to the hole contests on the par 3s. So I walked out of there with $500 in golf shop credit. So, I mean, I got something. I got some sweet crystal to bring home, you know, and some golf shop credit that I didn't get to use because the award ceremony was at night. So as I told my wife, I was like, that just means I have to go back out there.
Right.
You know?
Can't let that $500 go to waste.
Absolutely not.
I'm guessing a good meal or two to be had in Tulsa, Oklahoma, too.
Oh, man, yeah, absolutely. That is a sleeper of a place. You would never think about it, but, man, I tell you, I've been there a couple times now and really enjoy it.
What is one thing about money that you wish you knew earlier?
Basically what we taught our girls in regard to investing, in the value of just letting time do the heavy lifting. I mean, my dad taught me about investing when I was young. I mean, I was probably 13 when he was taking me to school in the mornings, and we would just talk about it. And like I said, he was a physician by trade, but he loves investing, and it's something we always talk about together. Even I wish I got started earlier. Like, I mean, it is what it is, and I'm not holding that against him at all because I'm grateful that he taught me what he did when he did. But that, to me, was why it was so important to get our girls started as young as possible, because I look back on that with not one regret.
What is a charitable cause that you like to support?
So a cause that I've supported for many years, and you just have an automatic donation goes to Wounded Warriors. I just believe very strongly in the folks that serve our country and fight for our freedom. And there was a little bit of a frustrating time because Wounded Warriors, they had a little bit of a stretch, I think in 2016 or so, where some leadership controversy and misallocation of funds, and it really kind of brought to question what they were doing. And they saw donations fall off and everything like that. And ultimately, they cleaned house, brought in new leadership, and I think that they have got it back on track, and they're doing many good things. And to me, it also always just kind of serves as a lesson with investing, right? Sometimes we invest in companies, and leadership teams end up not really panning out, or they make bad decisions. But if you see that change in leadership, and you see the company kind of through a fresh set of eyes, patience is always a good thing, I think. And so sometimes it takes a little while for it to play out. But yeah, I've never had any problems supporting the folks that serve our country.
Do you have a favorite movie or TV series about money?
I think the one that stands out the most is Succession. And maybe that's a little bit of recency bias playing in there. But HBO's Succession to me was so good. I just enjoyed every aspect of it.
The last thing is a penny for your thoughts. This can be about money. It doesn't have to be about money. It can be about anything. Just advice or some bit of wisdom that you've picked up along the way that you can share with people who are listening.
I just think having patience in life, especially in investing, is just such a valuable quality. And it's something I think about often. Impatience can just lead to emotional and bad decisions in no matter what you're doing. So taking a step back, assessing the situation, understanding what's going on, stay patient.
That's that almost philosophy degree coming through.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go. If you want to find more investing insights from Jason Moser, look him up online at fool.com. I'm Chris Hill. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next week.